Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown. We have another amazing edition of Court Call with Ronnie Nunn, and we're going to focus on Game 5 between the Thunder and the Clippers. Ronnie, I hope you had a chance to calm your heart up from a fluttering from last night's game.
You know, this was the plays that we're presenting from our fans writing in are really tough split hair situations. And we can talk about them, and I think talk about them in all fairness in terms of technicalities and in terms of feel for the game. That's appropriate, not feel where you let something go because it's a time score, top ball players, or whatever have you. This is the toughness of basketball officiating, and let's go through some of these so they can really be seen and talked about.
So we have Pablo got to me on Twitter to ask me about the clear path foul that happened in the first quarter after Darren Collison lost the ball. So just describe to us, this is an interesting experience where there's a pass involved. What's the rule for clear path when a pass is involved in the play?
Yeah, what's really good about this play is it's hardly ever seen, but this is under the umbrella of clear path. Remember, a clear path, to be determined clear path, has to be above the tip of the circle of the backcourt. And guess what? When we stop it at that point, we can see that the new offensive player has the ball above. He's stolen the ball above the tip of the circle. And now when he passes it ahead, this is the clear path play I'm talking about. He's all good because the foul doesn't occur until after the ball was passed. If he fouled them prior to the pass, it would have been a common foul. Obviously, if they're in the penalty, we would shoot penalty shots. But otherwise, he releases it. It is to his teammate who's ahead of the pack or ahead of the defender. And yes, this is clearly a clear path foul. I'm glad the guys got it right. This is not the one that you usually see.
A lot of people were questioning that, and I tried to get on Twitter to explain that, but I'm glad you were here to put the final kibosh on it. Let's move on to our next play then, because we have DeAndre Jordan getting his sixth foul deep into the fourth quarter on a ball screen, and we had Mitch and Wesley Pipes here wanting to know whether or not that was a good call.
You know, I'm going to tell you something. This is still a growing situation in the NBA for both the officials and for players. This is something that at New Hoops IQ I focus on, of one of the operative fouls that officials will make. If some might and some might not, but why put yourself in that vulnerable situation? When you set a high screen, a baseline screen, wherever you set a screen, if you move to chase the ball handler's defender and you move ever so slightly laterally, most officials today now are calling that play as an offensive foul. In this case, I will tell you that as the game went on with certain movements of this type, this seemed like the one that was most subtle and maybe most not really a foul that you'd want to put in at this time, because you haven't done it continually through the game.
You can see in the freeze frame that his initial stance is way wide, which is a real big red flag we've talked about in the past. And yes. I think the bigger mistake he ends up making is he drags the right foot back behind him as the contact's being made, and that just doesn't smell right, I don't think, to any referee.
No, it doesn't smell right, and referees also know, listen, if I'm going to pull this whistle out and put some air in it, it's the same thing as a player saying, I'm going to take a shot. And if you take that shot at a critical time, you got to make sure you make it. And here's the same situation. You don't fool around with a play like this unless you're clear about it. The official was clear about the movement. He's covering himself to make sure it's seen so he's not the brunt of conversation later about it, because the key is call the plays that need to be called and let the players adapt.
Well, let's get to the big play that everybody wants to know about, which is the Reggie Jackson steal going to the basket, Matt Barnes hitting the ball. We have some rules going on. We have some interpretations. We have replays. So, Ronnie, what happens here? Let's talk a little bit about what happened on this play. We have Matt Barnes knocking the ball out. And how do you see the referees interpreting what ultimately they decided to do?
Well, first of all, this is a play that's so tight that hand and ball on the first attempt to strip it, probably for me, and my eyes to see, I probably would have gone with a foul, because there's always usually a wrist involved when you get this close on momentum. And if it gets to the hand, it usually will get over to the wrist somehow, just because of momentum of two bodies, one body certainly going in a certain direction and one waiting on it. But the bottom line is that once this ball is deflected, because you can't go a foul when you go to instant replay. It's an out-of-bounds play. We should know that. It's 2 minutes and under. We can go to that. But the bottom line is when the ball is hit, let's say it's hand and ball, and they pass on that play for that reason. Now we've got to see who touches this ball last. But in this case, the ball gets into a float, and it floats somewhere up towards the right hand or arm of Jackson. And that's what it appears to have happened, that the ball went out of bounds on him. But when the officials went and looked, I think they really had a hard time confirming that this play was really the play that, that really caused them to say, look, how sure are we? On the second piece of that ball, it looks like it does hit it. But when you're in a replay situation, you want to get every benefit you can get from it. And there are some plays in replay that are somewhat inconclusive. It certainly does appear that Jackson hits it, but it's not conclusive. I think if we had to hang somebody or put somebody in the electric chair, I don't know if we could do that. And in a game like that, that's what the officials are thinking.
Wow. Well, Tony Brothers came out with a statement right after the game, and it seems clear that they did not invoke the hand as part of the ball rule anyway, because he simply said that they looked at it from different views and it was inconclusive who the ball went out on. And so because it was inconclusive, they had to maintain the call they originally made. And so that's why it remained OKC's ball. So, but here, let me get the one thing clear. Let's just pretend that they invoked that rule. And he hits the ball and it comes loose. It's supposed to be OKC's ball, correct?
Yes, it should have been OKC's ball, right?
Because if he hits it, though, and then it hits off another part of the body, or after that initial strike of the hand, and it hits off of OKC a little bit, and then goes out of bounds, it would be the Clippers' ball, right?
That's correct. That's a play where two sequences of things happen. I'm sorry, two things happen in one sequence.
Okay.
So yes, go ahead.
So we have those two things happening, and so the bottom line here is, it seems pretty conclusive that it does hit Reggie Jackson's hand after the fact. So, in theory, it would have been the Clippers' ball if they were looking at the hand as part of ball rule and it still touches him. So, but let's put that one away for a second, because now we have those things clear a little bit. What he is seeing is, all he's saying is, okay, I called it for OKC. Is there enough evidence that it hit off of Reggie after the initial, strip to give it to the Clippers? Now, he is saying no. I think a lot of people are scratching their head about that, and that's where we are right now. You feel like at that point when you're seeing what those replays is, you can't quite tell if it does hit Reggie's hand after the swipe.
Yeah, that's the problem. The ball goes out very quick, if you notice. It really gets out there. It's not like it goes up, it goes down, it floats up, it floats out. It's all in one motion. This ball, almost in the momentum of the player, all go out at the same time. So I think the officials are really trying to be honest with everything. And sometimes when you think too much, you might get it wrong. But when the picture is showing you something where if you're for, OKC to get this ball, then you realize that Reggie Jackson, got it, that it hit him last. If you're a fan on the other side, you feel that, he didn't hit it. It is really hard to determine, and maybe there's a new camera angle that needs to be put in on such a play. This one is as good as it gets, but maybe one on the sideline at that angle too, plays at the hoop that are right about that in that area. Maybe a sideline camera would work somewhere along either where fans sit or the benches are.
Right. Well, I'm not going to have any sympathy because I'm looking at the top angle, and you can actually, when you watch it again, you can see the ball kind of propel again in the same direction Reggie's going, which I got 4 frames at least after the swipe where the hand is touching the ball, and as his follow-through goes, the ball continues to propel that direction. So I'm just a bit mystified that they were unwilling to reverse that call. Well, let's talk about the next play we have here, which is the Russ three-point shot out of nowhere, suggested by Marvin, because he wanted to question whether or not that was really a foul. And I got to tell you, I went through this quite a bit last night. I finally was able to find a picture from the OKC newspaper that had an angle where you could see Chris Paul was actually touching the elbow. But what do you feel about this call and whether or not they got it right?
Well, you know what? We can see that Chris Paul is doing one thing he should not do. He should really be noticeably fading away with his arm on his vertical look of his arm against this shot, instead of having an angle of any type going toward Westbrook. And what he does on this play, as I see it, is his angle is really toward it, and he fouls him. I think if he would just have bailed with his arm in the direction of where the hoop was, and Westbrook was chasing that arm to get contact, it would have been a great no call. 3-point shots are tough shots to make. And you cannot add to it by being in a position to foul somebody.
Yeah, and it keeps happening, and a lot of these are legit, or most of them are legit. And I think that it's the twisting motion that you're talking about that Chris Paul does ends up, completely perpendicular to Russ. It just doesn't look right either. And you could argue, yeah, that twisting ends up bringing his arm into the contact of the elbow. So, it's impossible at that point. Like, how are you going to be able to mitigate that when you're playing and whatever? But certainly, those are the things that don't help. It just frustrates me as a coach that it was a really terrible shot, and it looked like Scott Brooks, after the baseline out of bounds play that he drew up, had nothing else in mind. So they have all these guys kind of running around out there. You're only down by 2. You don't even need a 3 there. And it was so shocking that he just sort of threw it up there that it frustrates me that it ended up being such a great success for the Thunder, primarily because he got the 3 free throws in the lead. But let's move on to our next play, which is the final drive. Chris Paul, the world is his oyster. They're only down by 1. They have plenty of time to run a play. And he gets to the hoop. He passes up a really good possible shot, having Ibaka off balance. And there were a lot of people clamoring for a foul here as he drives by. And I know Isaac was out there on Twitter asking us. So, was this a foul on Reggie Jackson?
This is the example that I was saying before about a tap on the elbow. And at that particular piece, I would have liked to have seen another angle of that, because that is a foul. And, there's a funny thing about the elbow on the body, and we see it all the time with jump shooters. If you hit an elbow, it almost flattens out a shooter. The elbow is the funny bone and things like that. I think there's something there on that, because the player loses the ball. And of course, what I was referring to before, it's not a hand-to-hand to ball dribble. This is an attempt to secure a ball, and now all of a sudden the elbow was flicked, and we end up, a player cannot retrieve that ball with either one of his hands, and now he loses it. That particular play, and by the way, if it were called, somebody else would be talking. It would be a ticky-tack play. So I think what happens in basketball is sometimes the result of a play or the finish of a play helps you determine really the development of what occurred, which was cool then, but at the finish is where the error was. I would have liked to have seen a whistle there, primarily because of that. Now, it may not have looked like enough contact, because there are contacts on arms during a dribble sometimes that we don't call. And it's proper not to call it. But this situation seemed to, because of the location of the hit and because of the player not being able to secure the ball, it makes it look like, not because it's Chris Paul and he's great at ball handling and securing his ball, it makes it look like he was jarred in a unique area of his arm where he could not grasp the ball.
Well, a lot of great points there, and I agree. I think that I have no problem with that being a no call. I think that he got stuck in a bit of a no man's land there, and Ibaka did recover nicely. Probably would have made that shot extremely difficult no matter what. And again, I want to stress that no matter how much I disagree or get frustrated with the specific refs out there as well, the Clippers could easily have avoided this catastrophic meltdown if they had avoided any one of the number of mistakes they made, and they certainly made their share. And that's what you have to do as a coach, is to move on. So fantastic insights, Ronnie. I'm glad that we can get through this now, right away after the game, and hopefully heal some wounds and help us all move on to what should be an amazing Game 6.
The bottom line is, for coaches, players, and fans, is to leave the referees alone and concentrate on what you must do to win your game. Yes, every once in a while they pop up as a pivotal individual in the situation. But no matter what happened in that game was really about the players not being as polished as they should be. And the officials in this situation are going to miss a play sometimes, or are going to have a situation occur. I continually would say to players, listen, get your focus back on what you do, because I'm trying to focus on what I do, and you can make it a lot easier if you polish up what you're doing. So really, this is about a player versus player and coach versus coach situation, about honing in their guys. And each team in the last 2 games here have had this struggle. So it's not an officiating issue in my view, though we have something very unique here in a couple of occasions.
Absolutely. Well, great stuff again. Thanks for coming on and giving us all that great insight. And don't forget, if you want to submit a call, use the hashtag CourtCall on Twitter, and we'll get to it. So thanks for joining us, sports fans. And don't forget, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?
I'm in, Coach. Thanks for having me.